From 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge ruled Cambodia with an iron fist. Their short rule was marked by genocide and famine, resulting in the death of 25% of the country's population. The regime was paranoid, and tens of thousands of accused saboteurs and counter-revolutionaries were imprisoned. Many of them were sent to the notorious S-21, also known as Tuol Sleng, a high school, turned into one of the most chilling extermination centers of the 20th century. Cloaked in the guise of a prison, S-21 was the epicenter of a silent genocide. This was not merely a prison, but a factory of death, where an estimated 99% of those who entered never emerged alive. In 1975, the Kingdom of Cambodia became democratic Kampuchea. After 8 years of bloody civil war, the communist forces of the Khmer Rouge came to power. Many people welcomed the revolution, expecting the new regime to put an end to political corruption and create a freer, more equal society. In reality, however, it was the beginning of one of the darkest chapters of Cambodian history. The Khmer Rouge blended communism with a particular form of Cambodian nationalism, eschewing everything and anything considered Western or imperialist. Entire cities were evacuated, and their populations were forced to relocate to the Cambodian countryside to work in agriculture. Thousands were killed before they even reached their new homes, as people considered sympathetic to the West were executed on the roadside. These included former government workers, school teachers, performers of non-Khmer music, merchants, and businessmen. The party wished to bring about Year Zero. Their aim was to rid Cambodian society of all foreign elements that it believed were defiling the once great nation. This included clothing, music, food, ideology, medicine, and finance. The goal was to create a purely Cambodian society based entirely on agricultural production. Educated professionals and former government workers were despised and considered a danger to the regime. The purification of Cambodia was incredibly bloody. Over 500,000 were executed, and millions more died due to famine. Security Prison 21. The Khmer Rouge operated over 150 dedicated punishment and execution centers. These were prisons dedicated to housing and interrogating those who were considered the regime's greatest enemies. These centers were not searching for the truth. They were searching for a confession. Whether the accused was guilty or not was irrelevant. The most notorious of these centers was Security Prison 21. From 1976 to 1979, around 17,000 people were held in this prison. These prisoners were handpicked by the Khmer Rouge secret police, the Santabal, meaning keepers of peace. The prison began as Tuol Sleng Pre High School. Work to convert the former school began in March or April of 1976. The complex was encircled with electrified barbed wire fences. All windows were covered in iron bars, and the classrooms were converted into cells or punishment chambers. In the early days, most prisoners were former agents of the previous Lon Nol government, such as politicians, civil servants, soldiers, and their families and associates. The prison also housed academics, teachers, doctors, students, engineers, and Buddhist monks. Prisoners were accused of espionage or counter-revolutionary activity. As with most bloody revolutions, paranoia soon turned the party on its own members. Hu Nim was a former school teacher and dedicated socialist. Hu had been a socialist activist since the late 1950s and fought the Khmer Rouge during the Civil War. He served as the Minister of Information for the newly created state of Democratic Kampuchea, but was known to be outspoken and willing to disagree with the party. He was implicated in the confession of another party member and former teacher, Khoi Thuon. He was held for months, during which he suffered constant punishment. His final, forced confession would read, "Would the party please show clemency towards me? I am not a human being. I am an animal." He was executed on the 6th of July, 1977. Hundreds of former party members would undergo a similar experience. Prison life. Prisoners were photographed and formally identified upon their arrival at the prison. They were forced to write or dictate a detailed account of their entire life, leading up until their arrest. All their possessions were confiscated, and they were forced to undress, leaving nothing but their underwear. They were then taken to their cells. The cells were occupied by dozens of other prisoners, who were chained either directly to shackles on the wall or long iron bars. Talking with other prisoners was forbidden, and they slept on the hard wood floor with no blankets or sleeping mats. Prisoners were awoken at 4:30 a.m. and stripped naked for inspection. These inspections were intended to locate hidden items that might be used to commit suicide. Their daily rations consisted of 4 small spoonfuls of rice and a largely nutrient-deficient soup made of leaves and herbs, twice a day. This meager diet was intended to keep them alive and nothing more. Prisoners were forced to defecate into empty ammunition boxes, sometimes being forced to eat it by particularly violent guards. The prison environment resulted in rashes, lice, ringworm, and other conditions. The prison did have medical staff, but they were untrained and unwilling to use modern medicine, which was considered Western and un-Cambodian. Much like the diet, the only objective of these medics was to keep prisoners alive between punishment sessions. If an illness or injury was not potentially fatal, it was left untreated. Punishment. Despite having only been accused of a crime and not convicted, being sent to S21 was in essence a death sentence. Prisoners were usually held for 2 or 3 months, after which they were almost always executed, if they hadn't already died, due to starvation, disease, or punishment. Prisoners were given their first interrogation within 2 or 3 days. The intention was to force them to confess to whatever crimes the party wished to accuse them of. Prisoners were rarely guilty of espionage or sabotage, and so interrogation was seldom successful in extracting a confession. Prisoners who did not confess were brutally tortured using various methods for months on end. The most senior prisoners could be kept and punished for even longer. Comrade Duch, commander of the prison camp, recalled during his trial, "When we started torturing, he started confessing." One of the most common allegations was that the prisoner was a spy for a foreign agent, usually the USA or Communist Vietnam, a great enemy of the Khmer Rouge. One method used to prove this was to force prisoners to bow to a picture of a dog with the head of Ho Chi Minh. Even though they were beaten if they did not do it, this was taken as evidence of their foreign allegiances. There were 3 levels of interrogation: cold, hot, and chewing. Those in the cold unit, sometimes referred to as the gentle unit, could only be verbally interrogated. The hot unit was allowed to physically punish prisoners. The chewing unit was for the most important cases, where the most vicious forms of punishment were used. Prison guards, all loyal soldiers of the Khmer Rouge, were not immune from punishment. They were held to incredibly high standards and barred from even sitting down or leaning against a wall while on duty. All conversation between guards and prisoners could also be taken as evidence of a conspiracy. These guards were themselves terrified of violent punishment, or even being in prison themselves. The executions were particularly savage. Cambodia was a poor nation with few allies, very little industry, and no export trade. Because of this, ammunition and weapons were in short supply, and the decision was made not to waste any on prisoners. Those due to be executed were taken to the Crow's Feet Pond Execution Center. Here they would be beaten to death by young teenagers loyal to the party, with iron bars, pickaxes, machetes, and other instruments. In one case, a New Zealander who accidentally sailed into Cambodian waters, Kerry Hamill, was placed inside a tire and burned alive. In his confession, he claimed he was a CIA operative working for Colonel Sanders. Survivors. Thousands passed through the walls of S21, but only 12 are known to have survived. Most of these were spared due to their skills, which were of use to the camp administration. One woman, Chim Meth, was spared due to her region of origin. She was born in Kampong Thom, the birthplace of Comrade Duch. During interrogation, she emphasized her provincial accent, gaining favor from Duch. Van Nath was one of these survivors and gave an account of his imprisonment at the trial of the prison commander, Comrade Duch. Due to starvation, Nath and other prisoners were forced to eat insects that crawled across the floor or dropped from the ceiling. But being caught doing this would result in severe beatings. Prisoners who died in their cells were left chained, with the others forced to live, sleep, and eat amongst the rotting corpses. He escaped execution due to his artistic abilities, and he was commissioned to produce paintings and sculptures of Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge. Chum May was a mechanic before the revolution. and after the revolution was sent to Phnom Penh to fix boats for the Khmer Rouge. Over a few days, his superiors were arrested, until eventually he and the other workers were told they were being transferred to work elsewhere. They were taken to S-21. He was whipped with cables, beaten, and had fingernails removed. After multiple days of this, he confessed to being a saboteur and purposefully destroying tools and materials at his work. He was confined to a room with 30 or 40 other men, and every night, 2 or 3 were taken away to be executed. His life was spared because he had the skills to repair that camp sewing machine, after which he became the camp mechanic. Though still a prisoner, he received larger servings of food and water. Bo Mung was another survivor, a painter by trade. He fought in the revolution, hoping the rebels would crown the deposed former king, Norodom Sihanouk. Soon after the Khmer Rouge victory, he realized he had been fighting for a lie. After a short stay at a detention center, he and his wife were told they were being sent to a fine arts school to create artwork for the party. Instead, they were both taken to S-21. Unaware of the crime he had supposedly committed, he told the guards he was innocent, but was told that the party makes no mistakes. For weeks he maintained his innocence. He was electrocuted, whipped, and beaten. He finally relented, confessing to be in a CIA cell headed by monks at a Buddhist pagoda. Eventually, 2 boys came to his cell in search of skilled painters. He was told that if his painting skills were not lifelike, he would be executed. He was allowed to meet with other privileged prisoners and became friends with Van Nath. He eventually escaped as the Vietnamese army closed in on the prison. He came to find out his wife had been executed at S-21, and his children had been sent to a center for orphan children, and both died of starvation. The fall of the Khmer Rouge. The prison was liberated in 1979 after communist Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia, driving what remained of the Khmer Rouge into the jungles of northern Cambodia. Vietnamese photographer Ho Van Tay was the first outsider to photograph and document the facility, exposing the regime's abuses to the world. The hallways were lined with corpses, and rotting flesh could be smelt well beyond the walls of the prison. Many prisoners are still yet to be identified. The prison kept meticulous records, pairing photographs with very detailed personal information. But at some point in 1979, during the Vietnamese invasion, photographs were separated from the identification documents, leaving thousands of faces without names.